Welcome to my UK Global Talent Visa webinar. And this webinar will be on the Global Talent Visa and the endorsement review or appeals process. So just a little bit about what I'll be talking about. I'll talk about myself just a little bit, introduce myself, what is the Global Talent Visa, the endorsement review appeals process, the forms that you would need if you do get an unsuccessful decision, a bit about your options that you can take, a few of my top tips. I've been doing this for quite a number of years now, and I've got loads of tips that I can share with you and ways that I can help you if you do receive an unsuccessful decision. So if I haven't met you, my name is Michelle Hewer. I am Australian, Vietnamese by background. I am now a British citizen and I'm also an Irish citizen. So I have 3 citizenships at the moment, and I think I'll stop there maybe. I am a global talent visa coach. And by virtue of the fact that in 2016, I received an endorsement for exceptional talent. And then I became the Technician Visa Ambassador for 2 years, because back then in 2016, it was a very new visa and Technician needed ambassadors to help tell their story. And that's what I did. And then with this visa, you can apply for settlement. So in 2019, I applied for indefinite leave to remain and received my citizenship after that. Just a little bit about myself. I spent a number of years in the UK, based myself in Manchester and Newcastle, so the north of England, and travelled a lot down to London. London was like my second home when I was building my startup. I had a wearable tech startup, and I started with an entrepreneur's visa, and then that was expiring. And at the time, they only just introduced the global talent visa in digital tech. So I switched from my entrepreneur's visa to my global talent visa, and I got that the first time. I used to be a solicitor in Australia, and got bitten by the entrepreneurship bug in Manchester when I was living there, and decided to start my own wearable tech company. How I started all this was I wrote a blog about my journey, because back then, if you can imagine, in 2016, the visa came out in 2014, but it was still very, very new. And I didn't know anything about it. No one knew anything about it. No one had heard anyone who got it. So because of that, I wrote a story about myself and how I got it. And that blog went viral. And then within, a few years, I started helping, lots of people, until I started this process and doing it full time now. So when I first started, I helped, 500, but now I've helped thousands, because I've been doing it since 2016. My success rate is 90%. Some of my clients have received a result within 3 to 24 hours, which is amazing. The average wait time for a decision is 3 to 4 weeks for the stage 1 endorsement, and then stage 2 is the visa. But I only deal with stage 1. The technician assessors can take up to 8 weeks. Average time is 3 to 4 weeks, but as I said, some of my clients have received a result really quickly. And over the years, my clients are coming from sort of WhatsApp, Meta, Sony, LinkedIn, startup entrepreneurs, CTOs, CEOs. You can see that list. It's endless. There's so many different people from different backgrounds who have a business and technical skill who have been applying and are getting it. So just a quick disclaimer, I only help with the stage 1 endorsement. There's a stage 2 visa process, and you can only start the stage 2 process if you've been endorsed. So I only deal with stage 1 endorsements. I'm not affiliated with Home Office or Technician. So when I applied for my visa, I showcased examples of leadership and the things that I've been doing for the UK tech sector. If you're in your own country, obviously you would show examples of your contributions to your own tech sector in your own countries. So I've been featured in lots of magazines. I've been asked to do lots of speaking gigs, featured in TechCrunch. I was a judge at a hackathon, an IoT hackathon, just because when I was in wearable tech, I became well known in the wearable tech industry, and people knew me. They knew what I was doing. And not only was I promoting my wearable tech startup, I was actually promoting my own thought leadership in the space. I wasn't just talking about, my company. I was talking about what was happening in the industry, sharing my insights. I was going to a lot of conferences. I was having lots of meetings with people. And yeah, so that's the kind of thing that the assessors are looking for, is they want you to have thought leadership in the sector that you're in. And this is the blog that I was talking about. It went viral when I wrote it in 2016. So you can have a look at it on my website. So the Global Talent Visa, in a nutshell, it's a special visa that was introduced to allow highly skilled tech entrepreneurs and talent or employees who work for companies in the tech sector to apply for the right to live and work in the UK for up to 5 years. It's a two-stage process. Stage one is there's that endorsement process. You must be endorsed by TechNation. And then in order to be endorsed, you have to meet the strict criteria that TechNation have. And then once you're endorsed, you can then apply for your stage 2 visa. Okay. It's more than a job application. Okay. It's, as I said, it's thought leadership. If you think about it, yes, it's about your job that you do, working for tech companies, but it's a bit heightened. It's more than that. It's based on merit and based off what you, how you add value to the tech sector, not just by working in your company. They did have the hashtag TechNation Visa to distinguish themselves, because the Global Talent Visa is an umbrella visa, and there are a number of endorsing bodies for different sectors. So, for example, TechNation at the moment, because there's going to be a new endorsing body announced shortly, TechNation is the current endorsing body for the digital tech sector. Then there's the arts. So there's another endorsing body for arts, that's the Arts Council. Then there's another endorsing body for the fashion sector, and there's architecture, there's science and engineering. So there's different sectors. It falls under the same umbrella, the Global Talent Visa, but obviously different endorsing bodies endorse. So I only specialize in the tech sector. So the benefits of the visa is that you have freedom and flexibility to live and work in the UK for up to 5 years. And it is true. I did it myself. So I was able to do my startup or work on my startup, be the founder of my startup, but I was also able to work anywhere I want to. You can apply for indefinite leave to remain in citizenship, which I did. You can bring your dependents with you as well if you have a family. You can register a UK limited company. And now this is important because I help some students who are on student visas, and under their visa, there's a lot of restrictions for them. So some of them switch from their student visa to the Global Talent Visa, and then they can register a UK limited company because they're inclined to sort of, maybe build their own startup and do, be a bit more flexible, and they can do what they want to do. You can also work for a tech company without the need for company sponsorship. So if you're in your home country, you can obviously get the Global Talent Visa, apply for it, and if you get it, you come over and you can work anywhere you want to, so long as it's in the tech sector, and you don't have to worry about a company sponsoring you. However, I do also help people who are already in the UK who are being sponsored by their company, but on a tier 2 skilled worker visa, but they want to switch to the Global Talent because it gives them a bit more flexibility. Because when you are sponsored by a company, you have to stay and work with them. You can't do your own thing. And if you switch from skilled worker to Global Talent, the time in the UK for you counts by virtue of being on the skilled worker and you switch over to the Global Talent. So time in the UK counts there. But obviously, if you're a student and you switch to the Global Talent, time in the UK being a student doesn't count towards the Global Talent Visa, and that affects your ILR application. And so the visa is attached to you. So when I switched from my entrepreneur's visa to Global Talent, that visa was attached to me, which means that I can work anywhere. So I worked for my startup, and then, I needed a break from my startup and I wanted to, experience other jobs. So I worked for an accelerator program, and then I moved to work for a university. So these were only like small stints, but my visa allowed me to work and do that and take a break from my startup and then come back to it when I was, finished with those employment opportunities. And also, I feel that the Global Talent Visa is cost effective only in that the stage 1 endorsement process, there's a fee and it's in the hundreds. So it's not like in the thousands, but that's just the endorsement process. The stage 2 visa fee is a little bit more, only because you have to pay for the immigration health surcharge, which is the NHS fee. But you only pay that if you do get endorsed and then you apply for the visa. But again, the application fee is not a lot. So I'll go through the fees in a second. So just a few stats. There are people from 90 different countries that are applying for the visa and the endorsement. There's a 54% endorsement rate, which is, 1 in 2 get through. So this is why I wanted to talk about appeals today, because, a lot of people are unsuccessful. 50% of people get an unsuccessful decision. And over the years, there's been over 5,000 successful recipients since 2014. If you think about it, it's not that much, but only because when I applied, and for a number of years after that, they capped the endorsements that assessors were allowed to give. So they were only giving up to 200 endorsements per year, which isn't a lot. But they have now lifted that cap. Whoever applies can potentially get endorsed. There's no cap for the assessors to look out for. So don't worry about that. When I applied, that was another stress as well. It's like, just because if you were a good candidate and you did meet the criteria, you could not be endorsed because they reached the cap. But it was there, but I don't think they really applied it that much. And not many people were applying anyway back then. But now there's loads more people applying, so there's no cap. I see someone's raised their hands, but just pop your questions in the chat and I'll get to them. Thank you. So you can apply for talent or promise. And I'll go through that under the categories, and that's the stats. There's more people applying for talent than promise. And there's a 75-25 split male-female. We know that because the tech sector is male-dominated. And then there's a TechNation Visa alumni that you can join once you are successful. I do have a separate alumni community because I've helped so many people. So you can join the bigger one, the TechNation one, or if you are one of my clients, you can join mine as well. So, okay, eligibility. Just quickly, you can have a technical or business skill to be eligible. These are some of the examples of the skills that would render someone eligible. Okay, now, I mean, if you don't fall within that, you just pick the ones that is closest to. But really, in a nutshell, technical skills is if you're involved with building a product for the company that you work for. And business skill is if you're involved in selling or growing the company that you work for. And the company that you must work for, and if you want to use that as evidence in your application, which you should, is you must be working for or have worked for a product-led digital technology company. Not a consultant, not outsourcers, not agencies, okay? Because down here, they don't want anyone who is a consultant or an outsourcer, a junior investor, or anyone who has a business skill they work within agencies, okay? So I get a lot of people who work for, the likes of Capgemini, Wipro, IT consultancy companies. They're not product-led digital technology companies. What they mean by that is companies that have a proprietary product, service, or software, and that's their main revenue source. Okay, so even if it's a consultancy and they do a bit of product development, what's the main revenue? What are they in the business of? More than 50% of their revenue generated. Is it through consultancy or is it through product development? It must be through product development. That's something that you have to prove. And unfortunately, I get a lot of queries. People work for JP Morgan, Capgemini, KPMG, Wipro. There's so many more. A Tata consultancy, unfortunately, they're not eligible for the global talent route just by virtue of the fact that it's a consultancy and outsourcing. They're not developing products. They're offering a service. Okay. So you need to provide 15 documents, which consist of a CV, your personal statement, and 3 letters of recommendations by experts in your field. Okay, and these experts have to be prominent people. Okay, yes, you can ask your boss or someone within your company that has a C-suite, title, but just because they are C-suite, that's not enough. You need to prove that they are experts in the field. So are they well known? Do you Google them and what else have they done? Have they done lots of speaking gigs and are they well known in the sector? That's the type of people that the assessors are looking for, okay? Not just people who you work with, but people who are well known in the sector. And then you also have to provide 10 documents in addition to those 5. So those 10 documents make up the mandatory and optional criteria. And I'll go through that very quickly next. So, as I said, the category, you can apply for exceptional talent or exceptional promise, and those that have more than 5 years experience should go for talent, and those with less than 5 years should go for promise. And this is 5 years in the digital technology sector. So if you've had, experience in just pure finance, but then you move to tech, the guidelines provide that in that case, look at your experience in the tech sector and go by that. Now, the difference between applying for talent and promise, okay, is that if you do apply for talent and you get talent, within 3 years of living in the UK and working in the UK tech sector, within 3 years, you can apply for indefinite leave to remain. However, if you apply for promise and you get it, you have to wait 5 years before you can apply for indefinite leave to remain. The difference is 2 years. Some people don't really care, but those who really do care are those who are on a tier 2 skilled worker visa. As I said, time in the UK counts. Okay, so if someone is on a tier 2 skilled worker visa, they've been in the UK for 2 years already. And the ILR rules for them is they have to wait 5 years before they get ILR. However, if they switch to global talent says if you get exceptional talent, you only need 3 years in the UK. Okay, then you can apply for ILR. So they've got 2 years on a skilled worker visa, 1 year on global talent, makes it 3, they can apply for ILR. And that's why a lot of my clients do switch, because it gives them an earlier route to settlement, and it gives them more freedom and flexibility, quicker freedom and flexibility, and they can do their own thing. Right. So this is the criteria. You've got 1 mandatory and 4 optional criteria, but you only need to choose 3 out of the 5 criteria. The mandatory criteria you have to choose. That's a given. So you need to show your leadership in the space. If you are going for talent, you go for leadership. If you are going for promise, you show that you're a potential leader in the field. And this leadership, you need to show national and international recognition in your field. Stuff like speaking gigs, writing articles, being well known. Do you Google yourself? What will you find if you Google yourself? You need to have a public facing profile. And that's why when I spoke to you about the things that I was featured in, I was asked to be a judge at a hackathon. I spoke at events. I was featured in lots of things. People knew me. That's the type of thing they're looking for. Okay. And you need at least 3 to 4 examples of this, because you've got 10 documents, 3 criteria. Okay. So if you choose, 4 examples under mandatory criteria leadership, then you only need to have 3 documents per criteria for the optional criteria. So you've got 4 optional criteria to choose from, but you only choose 2. The first one is you need 3 examples of innovation. Okay. Things like patents. I mean, I've helped a lot of clients who already have patents, so they would satisfy the innovation criteria. But you can show other examples of innovation as well. They don't always have to be patents, but they want to know that you are working on innovative products and it's in a new digital field or concept. You need 3 examples of that. OC2, optional criteria 2, is proof of recognition for work outside of your immediate occupation that advances the tech sector. So it's like volunteer work that helps, the tech sector improve, thrive, any kind of tech community organizations that you do. Very similar to leadership, like if you're volunteering, mentoring, if you're speaking, if you're writing articles, if you're impacting the tech sector in certain ways, that's not part of your job. The third criteria is if you've made significant technical, commercial, entrepreneurial contributions to the field, okay? And then you would need to have at least 3 examples of your impact. And this is metrics. They want to quantify your impact to show that you have made these significant contributions. And what are those contributions, and what's the impact? If you have any questions, just pop it in the chat and I'll get back to you. And then, so with the academic contributions, this is something that I chose, but only because I was working with a university in building my wearable tech product. And I had a professor who was also researching in the wearable tech space. So we worked together, and by virtue of working with the professor, I made some academic contributions to his research, and he made some academic contributions to my product. So this is that kind of stuff. It's not you having a PhD or master's. That's not what this criteria is about. It's about something extra to your education. Okay. Now, the process, as I said, there's two stages. Okay, the first stage, there's two steps. Okay, stage one is the endorsement stage. Okay, first of all, you have to pay and register online at the Home Office, and you pay $524. That's the endorsement fee. Okay, and once you pay and register online at the Home Office, then you go into step two and upload your documents onto the TechNation portal. You have 30 working days to do that. So payment first, 30 days to upload your documents. They say you've got 15 days, but then if you don't upload your documents within 15 days, they send you an email to remind you, and that you have another 15 days. So it's 30 days, upload all your documents on the TechNation portal and then submit. When I applied, it wasn't online. It was print everything out and send it to a place in Sheffield, and they had to go through my documents that way. Now it's all online, very easy. Then you have up to 8 weeks, okay? As I said, average is 3 to 4 weeks, and what they will do is the assessors will make a decision, and then they will send it back to the Home Office, and then the Home Office emails you to say whether you are successful or unsuccessful, okay? If you are successful, fantastic, you go to stage two, you go towards that stage two Home Office visa application. I don't help with this, so this is where you can do it yourself or seek a lawyer to help you do this. And you pay £192. You've got your biometrics. I think biometrics is only £19.20. I think that's when it was with me. I don't know if it's changed, but check that. The immigration health surcharge is that expensive fee, as I mentioned. It's $1,035 per annum per person. So if you are going for talent, you've got 3 years. If you want to only apply for 3 years, it's 1,035 times 3. But if you've got promise, or if you've got talent, but you just want 5 years in the UK, it's 1,035 times 5, and you have to pay that up front. So that's where it's the bigger fee, okay? And that takes 3 to 8 weeks, and then you should get your visa, okay? So just think about the time, okay? You've got 30 working days here. You've got up to 8 weeks that they make a decision. Average is 3 to 4, but they can take up to 8 weeks. Okay, and then they can take up to 3 to 8 weeks for this stage as well. I think you can pay priority for this bit. You can't fast track this unless you fall within an accelerator that's listed that can fast track your application. It just fast tracks it. Doesn't mean that you'll get the successful decision. It's just time looking at it. So there is a bit of time, 8 plus, potential 16 weeks. Okay, potentially. Don't forget, there's a preparation part to it, to prepare all your documents. Now, if you are unsuccessful, and this is where a majority of my next webinar, part 2 of my webinar, is going to be about, is the unsuccessful part of the application. Okay, everything's been good news up until now, right? So if you are unsuccessful and you get the assessor's decision, the option for you is you can appeal if they've made a mistake. Okay, so you can appeal this, and you have 28 calendar days to respond to the assessor's feedback, and then send it in through the email that they provide you with the form, and then they have 28 calendar days to get back to you. So again, that's more time, okay? If they get back to you and say, yes, we agree with you, we're reviewing your application, and we don't agree with the assessor's decision not to endorse you, so we will endorse you. Off you go to stage 2, okay? But if they say, I'm sorry, we agree with the first assessor, unfortunately, these are the reasons why we think that the first assessor was correct, and I'm sorry, you're not endorsed, okay? So this is where you can do other things like resubmit or go to another visa route, okay? So that is the reality of that situation and the time that it would take. And you have to think about, if you are on an existing visa, when's the expiry, and work backwards to make sure you've got enough time. And if you are unsuccessful, you need to have obviously a backup plan and plan B, okay? Now, right, now I'm going to go into the appeal section, okay? So this is, if you are unsuccessful, you will definitely get a feedback form. But if you are successful, they just say, yep, you're endorsed, off you go. Okay, so only if you are unsuccessful, you get this feedback. They'll explain to you, your name and everything. This is the checklist that they go through. Okay, so this is the mandatory criteria, leadership, optional criteria, and they say yes or no. And then they say yes or no with that. Okay, but then they give you reasons for the unsuccessful decision here. Because you've got to do 3 criteria, you've got to meet 3 criteria plus your letters of recommendation. Okay, they might give you feedback on all of them, or they might give you feedback on some of them. They might pass you on some criteria. So it really just depends, but you'll know obviously which ones that that they've said no on, because they will say yes on some. Okay, you have to pass all criteria in order to be endorsed. If you say pass the mandatory criteria, but you don't pass the 2 optional criteria, you're not endorsed, but you only need to appeal on the 2 that they haven't passed you on. Okay, I'll give you an example of feedback for one type of criteria, and this is the letters of recommendation. Okay, so this is an example. The applicant provided the mandatory 3 letters of recommendation, but these merely outline projects that they have worked on, offering no distinctive insights into his abilities. None of the letters demonstrate how the applicant is an exceptional talent at the forefront of his field. Okay, remember how I said leadership is so important? You need to show that you're a national, international recognition in the field, not just by working for the company, but how do you add value to the industry at large? And another example of this type of feedback regarding their 3 mandatory recommendation letters, they are supportive of the candidate's work ethic. They provide details of some good working contribution, but there lacks any notable national or international acclaim. There is insufficient evidence to demonstrate the applicant is recognised as leading an exceptional talent within the digital tech sector. So as I said, it's more than a job application. They need to know not only do you work within your job, but what else do you do for the industry at large? Okay. And if you have provided these things, that's where you feel like, okay, well, the assessor's made a mistake. I have provided notable national and international acclaim. The assessor made a mistake. They didn't read it properly, or they missed it. Okay, so this is where you can make it, where you can ask for an endorsement review and appeal the assessor's decision because they made a mistake. But if you didn't provide any national, international acclaim, was it really their mistake or was it your mistake? Okay, so you have to look at this objectively. And this is where I get a lot of queries, because people, when you're working on your own projects, you only obviously, I don't want to say this in a bad way, but you have a bit of tunnel vision because you have a goal and you want to get to it. Whereas if you have someone who's completely not related or connected to your projects or anything, and they come in with fresh eyes, that's my job. I come in with a fresh perspective and I look at your application and I go, well, yeah, it doesn't really say it. This is why the assessor couldn't see it, because you may know what you're talking about, but the assessor may not. You may have missed certain things. Okay, so this is where my support comes in to help you kind of understand why the assessor did this or said this, or just confirm that, yeah, you're right, you did the right thing. Let's appeal. Let's ask for a second one. So when you do get an unsuccessful decision, you've got 3 options. Okay, you can apply for the endorsement review and appeal. Okay. Or you feel like, okay, well, I kind of get what the assessor's saying. I did this application myself. I was very hasty in how I prepared it. I had a client that did it within 2 weeks. And as soon as he submitted, he emailed me and said, just letting you know that I did this application myself. I submitted it. I feel like it's not a great job, but if I am unsuccessful, I'd like to talk to you about it. So they already kind of knew that they may not get it because they didn't put enough work into it. So they decided to resubmit. Yes, they were unsuccessful. So we resubmitted their application and they got it. Okay, because we used the feedback from the assessor and we resubmitted. Or you may have other visas. So for example, some clients go for the global talent, but they don't get it. But they're starting their own startup and they really want to be in the UK. So they go for the startup visa or the innovators visa because they couldn't get the global talent. Everyone wants the global talent. That's the best visa to get because it's so it's flexible and gives you so much freedom. But if you don't get it, again, I talk about the backup plan. Their backup plan was to get the startup or innovators visa. Okay. Now, For the appeals, this is in the guidelines, but just in summary, mistakes can happen. And I do help clients appeal the assessor's decision. And yes, sometimes we do get it overturned because it gets sent to a new assessor to review the application and the appeal. Your appeal should be clear and concise. Focus on the assessor's mistakes. So answer what the assessor has said. Okay. And this is a big one because no new evidence is allowed, which means if you're doing this application yourself, it should really be, you should put all your effort into it. Okay. And people don't want to get someone to review it because they say, I'm just going to submit and then I'm just going to see how I go. I'm going to risk it. Okay. The risk is fine if you have time in the UK and it's, but once they get an unsuccessful decision, and you want to appeal, you can't look back and say, oh no, I should have done this and I should have done that and I should have put this evidence in. You can't put new evidence in. So if you're going to do it right the first time because you don't want to waste time. You don't want to come back and forth with the appeal and no appeal and then potential resubmission. It takes more time. So I feel like if you're going to do it, give it your best shot the first time. Okay, because once you have an unsuccessful decision, your mindset changes. Okay. And sometimes people are a bit more reluctant to go around the second time. They have a less motivation. They're less inspired. They're a bit traumatized by the whole experience. So this is where it's important to kind of do it right the first time. Otherwise, when you appeal, this is where sometimes I look at applications and I tell my clients, I said, look, I can help you, but I would rather help you if you resubmit because I can make your application stronger, whereas the appeal, no new evidence is allowed. So we can only work with what we've got, okay? Convince the assessor why. Why did they make a mistake? And reiterate things and point to things in your application. Say, no, the assessor made a mistake and this is where they made the mistake, okay? Now, these are the benefits, okay? You can look at this strategically as well. I mean, obviously, everyone who appeals wants to get that endorsement. They want the decision overturned. So if there is a mistake, yes, appeal. It's a chance for another assessor to review your application. So if you really feel strongly that the first assessor made a mistake, go ahead, get it looked at again. Otherwise, and this is where sometimes I do talk to my clients and say, well, look, it's a 50-50 if you're going to get a successful result, but what you can do is appeal and get more feedback because we want to resubmit and we want as much feedback as we can so that we can make the second application even stronger. And we've got two sets of feedback, not just one. So that's a strategy that we sometimes take, but sometimes, people don't want that. So it really depends. Do you want to get a review or you want to get further feedback to then resubmit? There is no fee to appeal, which is great. So you can, it just takes time, 28 calendar days to respond, 28 calendar days for them to come back. Okay, but the risk of appealing is a new assessor making new decisions about, your criteria that some have passed it, but others haven't. The next assessor might not. They might be even harsher, with the decision and say, well, actually, the first assessor was quite relaxed in this, but I'm looking at this fresh and no, definitely not. Okay, so that's the risk that you face. You've got 28 calendar days. And then, as I said, you need 3 yeses for your mandatory criteria, optional criteria 1, 2, 3, and 4, whichever one you choose. You need to pass all of them. Now, if they made a mistake only on one criteria, but they were right on the others, even if you appeal and they were right on the others, but they weren't right on one criteria, is it really worth appealing when you know that, yeah, you might have made a mistake on one criteria, but even though they made a mistake on the other criteria? Do you get what I mean? It's just, will your appeal actually change the outcome or will your time be better spent making a fresh application? Okay, this is something that, you need to consider. Sometimes I get some clients, they don't pass the mandatory criteria leadership. It's so clear that they don't. But the assessor made a mistake in one of the optional criteria. And I say, well, yeah, I think they made a mistake in the optional criteria. We can appeal on that ground, but the mandatory criteria, I don't think you're going to pass on that. So you need to decide, do you want to appeal? Are you going to waste your time appealing? Or shall we just go fresh and make sure you hit all 3 criteria? Okay. If you do want to appeal, this is the form. Okay, and they send that to you by email when they give you the feedback. So that this is just your details, and then you send it to this email address. And this is where you only have space in these boxes. So the first box, 2.1A, is the assessor's decision, and 2.1B is your appeal, why you think the assessor made a mistake, and you've only got this much room. And then if they have another piece of feedback, put the assessor's decision here and then state your case here. So it's very structured. It's one paragraph, this is, say the assessor made a mistake for the mandatory criteria, then leadership, then you talk about that. If it's about innovation, put their decision about innovation and then state your case here. And then obviously you sign and then you submit the form. Okay. So some of the common questions that I get, should you seek a review or appeal? Should you get help in drafting the appeal? Sometimes I, look at my client's application and I say, well, okay, I'll give you tips. This is how you can appeal yourself because I feel like there's a big risk. Don't, spend your money getting me to draft it. You can certainly draft it yourself, and this is how you should do it. Will you have enough time? Okay, this is another thing. Some of my clients on an existing visa, and they have to leave the country. So, they didn't look at how much time is needed to prepare this application, because if you do get an unsuccessful result, there's a whole nother process and their visa may have expired. So that's a big risk. So start this process sooner rather than later. I would say if you have an existing visa, I'd give it 12 months, okay, to start this process, because you just want to give yourself enough time. And then, sometimes my clients say, look, how can the assessor make a mistake? I did what was in the guidelines, and this is where I come in and I explain the decision, and maybe there are some things missing in your application, or the assessor did make a mistake. People are human. Yes, I know. So we have to discuss that. So 28 calendar days to submit your review and 28 days to get a decision. So that's like 60 days. That's 2 months potentially. And then check the timing of your visa. Get immigration advice. I can't give legal immigration advice, so check that. If there's an issue with time, I always refer clients to get immigration advice before I start the stage 1 endorsement process. I don't deal with all that stuff because I'm not a lawyer. Okay, some of the top tips in helping appeals: break down each feedback so you can answer them separately. Go through your documents to see if you can use them to answer the assessor's feedback. So point to it, that this is where the assessor made the mistake. I did provide it and this is where it is. And don't be afraid to reiterate or repeat the content in your documents because they may have missed it. And be mindful of space limitations and deadlines to appeal. Okay. I have a whole page on my website dedicated to appeals because I get loads of inquiries about this, particularly when people are on a deadline and they need loads of help with the appeal. They don't know what's going on. It's an emotional and stressful process. So I created a whole page on appeals and how I can help. So have a look at that if you want to. Okay, but obviously there's the Global Talent Visa on my packages and lots of videos, and there's loads of content on my website. Okay. Some of my successful clients that I've helped with the appeal, some of them, obviously appeal is so stressful, and it's so nice to be able to help them turn the decision around. One client here, she didn't even want to appeal, and I felt that she had a very strong application because I helped her with it. And I said, can you just let me draft your appeal? All you need to do is read it and submit it, because I feel very strongly that the assessor did make a mistake. And she did, and she got it. So really happy that happened for her. Not everyone gets that, but I had an inkling that it was a grave mistake that the assessor did. And then here, sometimes my clients can't believe that the appeal was successful because, again, they just feel like, oh gosh, this is bad. Like I didn't get it. The assessor said that I wasn't good enough. But then, sometimes it's good. If you're not on a time basis, and if there's a 50-50 chance of getting it, go for it. Okay. And then this is some of my clients. I do help my clients not only in the appeal, but sometimes we say, look, let's forget about the first application. There's just too many things wrong. Let's go back and resubmit. And the resubmission, the application is a lot stronger because they can see the difference between their first and second application. And these are some of my clients that I met just only in October of last year. I flew to London and met some of my clients for the first, well, all of my clients for the first time, because I operate on a remote basis and I meet all my clients over Zoom, because they're all over the world, and some are in London, but it's just easier obviously to meet via Zoom. And then I hosted a celebration party last year and met them all, and this is only just some of them because London is such a transient city that so many people were traveling that couldn't make it, but these are the handful that could make it, which was amazing. Loved seeing them and celebrating with them for the first time. Some of them got their visas 5 years ago. Some of them have their indefinite leave to remain. None of them have got their citizenship yet, and that would be probably next year or some of this year. So these are some that just got it and some that have got it over the years, which has been amazing. And you can definitely join my community if you obviously work with me. But there is a bigger Tech Nation visa alumni as well. So this is how I can help you. If you do have an unsuccessful decision, okay, I can review your application and feedback and discuss your options. I can draft the appeal for you, or I can just say, right, we've got enough feedback. Let's resubmit a fresh application. Okay. Now, if I draft your appeal for you, and sometimes I do, and sometimes it is unsuccessful, or if it's successful, you go to stage 2 visa. If it is unsuccessful, I can help you resubmit the fresh application, just like here. This is just to get feedback and see how you went with the appeal. And then we form a new strategy, get new evidence, use the feedback to help us restructure your first application. And I do a lot of this with clients who have been unsuccessful the first time around, and then usually they are successful the second time around because we have feedback. They've been through that process. There's a bit more understanding of the guidelines and see what the assessors want. And we work very hard on that. And sometimes, well, most of the time, they do get it. Okay. Okay. We've got time for questions, which is great. And I hope that you've enjoyed this webinar. I'm just going to go into the questions. Just give me 2 seconds. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so in the appeal, is the fee to be paid again? No. So once you've paid that first stage 1 endorsement fee, which is $524, and you go through that process, and then if you have an unsuccessful decision, that form, you just email it. There's no payment needed to be made for the appeal. But if you resubmit a fresh application, you have to pay the $524 again. So the appeal itself, there is no fee. Okay. I don't know about withdrawing of the application before the due date. When you're saying the application, do you mean the original application? Because yeah, I think what you might need to do is you might need to email them and ask them. Yeah, the original application. I can't remember I can't remember. I did have this question a long, long, long time ago, but I can't remember the answer. So what you might need to do is email them and ask them if you have already paid for it. Yeah, it might be unlikely, but there's always an opportunity to ask and say, can I? I've had situations where clients needed a bit more time to extend. Because once you make payment, okay, right, let me take a step back. When I work with clients, and to stop this from happening, is I advise them not to pay for the step 1 process at the Home Office until all the letters are signed and everything's ready to go. Okay, because the time starts. The 30 working days starts from the time you pay, and you've got 30 working days to upload your documents onto Tech Nation. Okay, and sometimes this 30 working days lapses, and my clients ask me, okay, I need a bit more time to upload. This is when you ask the people that you've sent the money to, you say, can I have an extension before I can upload my documents? Sometimes, one time they did, but they only gave like a few days, which wasn't that much anyway. Other times they lost their money. But I did have a situation where they could have refunded. I just can't remember the circumstances. So just ask the question and hopefully they can, or even, it depends on the circumstances. So I'm sorry. No, you couldn't get the reference on time. Yeah, will the fee be refunded? So yeah, there is a risk that you might lose the refund. Maybe you can ask for an extension potentially. Okay. Can you reapply? Yeah, you can reapply. You can reapply at any stage. So if you've made payment and then you don't get a refund and the time has lapsed, just make sure the time has lapsed because there's no point paying if it's okay to do it with, even though it's expired. That's why you need to ask them just to make sure. But yeah, you can reapply. You pay the fee again and reapply. They're not going to say no to money. How many EOI applications can you submit? So this is not an EIOI process. So basically, once you apply for the stage 1 endorsement, that's your application, okay? And then you can get rejected or you can be successful. If you are rejected, okay, once you've done all that work, you can resubmit and you can do the process again. And then if you are unsuccessful, you can resubmit again. I've had clients that have submitted 3 times and they got it the 3rd time, obviously after working with me, because obviously at that point they're like, okay, I can't do this myself. I've done it twice myself and I really need the visa now. So I helped them with their 3rd application and they got it. So yes, you can apply as many times as you want, and you just have to pay the fee. Okay. Just don't obviously put the same evidence in because obviously the assessor is not accepting it. So there has to be something new and different about your application. Okay, so what I mean is so the question is about the 30 working days. So step 1, you pay at the Home Office. Okay, you've got 15 working days to upload your documents onto the Technation portal. Now, if that 15 days, if you haven't done that within 15 working days, they send you an email and they say, look, you haven't uploaded your documents within the 15 working day. You've got another 15 working days. Your actual deadline is in another 15 working days. So you've got 30 working days once you've made payment to upload your documents onto the Technation portal. They're 2 separate things. Okay, they're 2 separate steps. So I hope that helps. Does that make sense, Prachi? I hope so. Great. Okay, Michelle, I hope I've answered your question there. So any more questions, anyone? I hope I've answered everyone's questions. No, you only get 30 days. You don't get 60 days. It's 15 working days, and then they give you another 15 working days. So it's 30 working days. Okay. Okay. I think that's it. Yes, absolutely. Prepare all your documents. As I said, prepare your document, get everything signed. Okay. And once everything is signed and everything is ready, then you pay because that's when the time starts to upload the documents. I had situations where when I was doing my own application, I was waiting for a professor to give me his letter, and I spoke to him 3 weeks prior and he was sitting on his letter for 3 weeks. And I could have paid at the Home Office, but then that would start the time. So I had to chase him and chase him and chase him. And then I chased his wife, who was also a professor, and she got him to sign it and send the letter to me. And then that's when I started the signing process. Okay, started the application process. So make sure you have everything within your control first, and then make the payment and upload the documents. Okay, so this happens. I get this a lot, and this is about your experts. Experts are very busy, and when I work with my clients, first of all, we have to make sure that you have a good relationship with your expert because you're relying on them to write an amazing letter about you, and they're putting their reputation and credibility on the line for you. So before we start this process, we always determine how close of a relationship you have with them. Okay. And you also talk to them and say, look, this is what I'm doing. Do you think I can have your support? And if they do say yes, then give them a time. So give them, say, I'll be coming back to you in a few weeks' time where we can discuss the letter that I need from you, and give them an opportunity to say no. And even after sometimes my clients do that, and then, the letter's been written and last minute is the expert just signs the letter. And then the expert backs away or they're disappeared and they're never to be found. And that can happen. So we always have backups. We always think about, okay, give ourselves enough time to find a new expert who will help and support you. So we usually, when I work with my clients, have a list of experts and rank them. Unfortunately, we have to rank them to see which one's the best. And then obviously if people back out at the last minute, we find someone else to help write that letter. And that does happen. And it is very stressful. This is why this process is so stressful, because you have to rely on other people to help you. And it is, yeah, it does happen. Okay. Right. So in the guidelines, the letters require logos or branding on the letters. And sometimes big companies don't want their experts to use the company's branding and logo, because it might mean that the person who's writing the letter is writing on behalf of the company, which a lot of the legal teams which we've dealt with in this process say no. Legal always says no, we don't want anyone representing the company in recommendation letters. So basically, the next best thing is to have your expert have their own personal letterhead. So they have, their name on the letter in a letterhead form. So that would cover the fact that they can't write it on behalf of the company, because it might go against company policy, and especially the legal teams, because I deal with that a lot. So it can be a personal recommendation. So they just put their own name on the letterhead and then sign the letter in their own personal capacity. I have a lot of clients from big companies, these big tech companies, before they all said no letters at all. But then obviously this visa has been quite popular. So now they've changed their company policy and say, yes, well, anyone working for this big tech company, they can write personal letters, but just not in the company name, but they can write letters for people applying for the Global Talent Visa. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. So anything published in print media is you can use. Just because it's not online, it doesn't mean that you can't use it. But obviously, you need to showcase, what kind of publication is it? Is it a big one? Is it reputable? You need to find some information about it. Show what I don't know, brochure it is. Where it's from. So yeah, that's fine. You need to have evidence of that, and that's okay if it's not in digital form. Okay, so I'm just reading a question about awards. Okay, so under leadership in the guidelines, you can provide evidence of your achievements, like awards you've won, speaking engagements, blogs and articles and journals you've written. And the guidelines provide that you kind of can only go as far back as 5 years. Okay, so we're in 2025 now. So 5 years from this year is 2020. Because we're right at the early stages of 2025, you could risk putting something in 2019, but provided that there is some kind of sustained national or international recognition, because that's in the guidelines. So if you've got something from 2019, okay, on its own, it's not really enough to show leadership. But if you've had something 2019, 2021, 2023, that shows a bit of a track record of you speaking at events to showcase your thought leadership. But if you just have one thing back in 2019 and that's it, the assessor is going to say, well, what's happened from 2019 to now? What else have you done? But if you've won an award during that time, and if you've spoken at events and you've written blogs or you've done other things, then that might be okay. It's just if you've got something for 2019 and then nothing until right before you submit, you've got a few things, the assessor's going to maybe think, well, you're doing this for the purposes of the application and not because you're a thought leader in your field. Okay, so just be wary of times and dates of your evidence before you apply. Okay. I'm just reading I've got some really good conversations happening here, which is great. Right. So there's a question about using evidence for the same evidence for the criteria. So if you have 3 awards that you've won, yes, you can put them under the mandatory criteria. Yeah, so that's okay. As long as it's different awards and they're tech awards, yes, you can put that in, definitely. So that's okay. It's just you can't put like the same award in mandatory criteria and then that same award in optional criteria 3. You have to use different evidence under optional criteria 3 if you already put that in mandatory criteria. Yeah, so letters from experts. As I said, they should be Googleable or they should have some kind of presence. I had a situation where a client, some experts obviously don't want to be Googleable or anything, but they need to write a letter to showcase their credibility. They have to provide a CV at least. So, and they should be on LinkedIn or they should be, searchable in some form. So I had a client that had an expert, very prominent expert, but he was retired. So he was no longer, out there doing things, but he had a very prominent background and they had his CV and the things that he wrote and he was searchable. He was no longer part of that whole scene, but obviously because he's retired and they said he's sailing around the world, he's made his millions and now he's sailing around the world. So yeah, it really depends. And as I said, it depends, but just make sure that they are reputable, credible, have a good CV, so that the assessor not only assesses you, they assess your experts as well. And throughout your application, you want the assessor to have some kind of understanding, or you want the assessor to kind of feel like they know, like, and trust you through reading your documents and through reading the letters that the experts have written about you. So, they have a good feeling about it. So that's something that I always advise my clients is you can kind of tell when you're reading, your application, even though it's 10 documents, 3 pages per document, that's 45 pages. Okay. But then when you fill in the form, your whole application is going to be about 80 to 100 pages. And it's like a PhD thesis of your career. Someone has to read this. And if it's structured, if it's well written, if it shows that you've put effort into it and it's enjoyable to read, then the assessor is going to feel like they know, like, and trust you because everything looks good, everything is, where it should be. But if it's all over the place, the assessor is going to be like, oh gosh, I can't make sense of any of this. And I've seen those types of applications. They just don't want to read it. And, you want to make it like a story, like an enjoyable thing that they should be reading. Okay. I've got questions about if you know multiple languages, can that be put in some form? So yeah, I have a lot of clients that are bilingual, obviously, definitely, but everything should be in English. You can put that you speak many different languages in your CV and your personal statements, and experts can talk about it. But in terms of evidence of speaking different languages, there is no evidence that is required to fulfill the criteria for that. So that would be part through your storytelling in your application. If there's any documents that's not in English, they must be translated by a professional translator. If it's a legal document like a contract, but if it's a publication that's on the internet, obviously Google Translate can translate it. I've had patents that are in a different language. So we had to get an official translator to do that because it is a legal document. And we provided both the original patent and the translated patent as well. So there's lots of different types of support I provide. I didn't talk about my full support. I only talked about the appeals process. But yes, my support starts from very early on. I need to check your eligibility first. Okay. And if you are eligible, I'll invite you for a 15-minute free discovery call. So there's no payment required when I first speak to you, because I need to assess you and be comfortable that, obviously, if you have a good chance, then of course I want to help you. But if your application is high risk, I will discuss that with you, and then you can decide whether or not you still want my support. So from there, you can start with a strategy session with me. My strategy session is basically an overview of your last 5 to 7 years of your tech career, and we figure out your story. We find out who your experts can be, what criteria you're going to choose, and what documents we can put against each of your criteria. And the strategy session is 2.5 hours. I have one this afternoon, where we go through everything. It is a long meeting, but it's intense. But at the end of it, you'll have a clear roadmap and guidance of what your application is going to look like. We don't actually have the evidence, or you might have the evidence, but we need a plan. Any project, which this is, needs a strategy and plan in place before we get started. Within my strategy session, you also have access to my DIY membership area, which has all my templates and video explainers. I also just launched a leadership in tech course as well, which has, again, lots of videos and explainers about meeting the mandatory criteria. So you have all of that in the strategy session package, so that after the strategy session, you've got your plan of attack of what you should do. You can then go off and do the application by yourself using all my templates. And that's a do-it-yourself package. Otherwise, after the strategy session, and a lot of people do take this as well, they can upgrade to my review or my bespoke one-to-one coaching package. So you don't have to go with me throughout the whole process, but if you do, you can have part support through my review package, or you can have full support through my bespoke coaching package. And obviously my bespoke coaching package is my premium package. And this is where, if people have received an unsuccessful decision, they take my bespoke coaching package, because they know that they've done it themselves the first time, it didn't work. So I help them from start to finish for the stage 1 process. We work on all 15 documents with you, including all the letters, because obviously we need the experts to come in to help write the letters as well. So it's a collaborative process, and we work on all your documents, make sure that all the story is told through the evidence that you present. Okay. And that's my most premium package. And I stay with you until you're ready to submit. And then once you submit, sometimes I stay with clients. I mean, usually it's between 2 to 4 months coaching. Okay. But some of my clients have stuck with me for 9 months, and that's okay, because, they've been busy in their work. But usually it's about a 4-month engagement. And that package is my most premium package. And that package is £6,500. But that also includes the strategy session as well. And that's over a period of time. And I don't take the whole payment up front. I do installments, because I understand that it is a lot of money at the outset. However, if you only want my part support and my review package, so once we've done the strategy session, you can do it yourself, but then you come back to me halfway to say, Michelle, how am I going? And I'll look at some of your documents and say, hang on a second, let's just pull this back, and this is how you should do it. Okay. And I revise some of your documents and evidence, and then you go off and you do it. And before you submit, you present to me your application, and I review it like an assessor. But I do go one step further than the assessor. I not only give you feedback, but I give you comments on how to improve your application. Assessors don't do that. So I look at it and go, well, no, there's not enough information here. Let's put more things in there, because I've had the strategy session with you. I know your story. So I make sure that, you cross all the T's and dot every I, and add more things, or tell you to take things out. So that's my review package, and that's 4,500. Okay, but that includes the strategy session as well. So the review is part support. You do a lot of the heavy lifting, and I check, whereas the bespoke coaching package is the full package, end to end, from, the strategy session right until ready to submit. Now, with my bespoke coaching package, if you do get an unsuccessful decision, because I do not guarantee a successful application, but what I do guarantee is a strong application. I can never guarantee, because each assessor is different, If you do get an unsuccessful decision, I will help you in the appeal. I will definitely write the appeal for you because I know what's in your application and I know how to appeal, obviously. So I do that for you as well for my bespoke coaching package. Okay, so I hope that helps, and that kind of gives you an indication of how I can support you. I have got a number of people starting again, obviously with the new year, everyone's starting to look at this. I've got a number of strategy sessions that I take on, and that's the first part of the process. You don't have to decide that you want my, review or coaching package yet. Let's just start small. The eligibility is the main thing. 15-minute discovery call so I can have a look at your eligibility, but also look at if you could potentially meet the criteria. Because I don't want to say yes until I kind of know a little bit about you first, because anyone can say yes, but then realize actually you don't really have enough evidence and documents. I kind of have that general feel when I speak to you at the very beginning before I take any of your money. The strategy session fee is $1,750. That's 2.5 hours, but that also includes my DIY membership area. That's worth $799, and also my leadership in tech course, which is worth $399. So you get all that as well as my 2.5 hours, and you get the roadmap and plan of, I say plan of attack, but the strategy on what your application is going to look like. You have your story. You'll have a bit more clarity and confidence of where you are. You'll also see if there are any gaps in some of the evidence that we might need, but that's okay because you know what you have got, maybe what you do need, but you might actually have everything that you thought you didn't have. So at the end of it, my clients go, wow, I didn't realize that this document would go here, and that's the story I could tell. So yeah, it gives you a lot of clarity and confidence once you do the strategy session, and then you can digest and decide where you want to go. And this is where I encourage everyone to spend time preparing and giving yourself enough time with this process, because it's not that you have one shot at it. I've seen clients that do it without preparing properly, and then if they do have an unsuccessful decision, it's time, it's mental stress because they didn't prepare for it properly. And I see that a lot, and that's really hard to deal with because it is an emotional process already. I know I don't do what I did, and I waited 3 months before my visa expired. My entrepreneur's visa was going to expire. I had 3 months to do the global talent visa endorsement stage process myself. I did it all by myself. I didn't sleep. I was running my startup as well, fearing that my visa would expire and I would have to go back home when I've built my life in the UK for 3.5 years on my entrepreneur's visa. And I should have started the process a year before, but I didn't. So I'm only just advising you because of what I've experienced and what a lot of my clients have experienced as well. But obviously back then, no one knew about the global talent visa. I only just stumbled across it with, 4 months left on my visa. And I went, oh my gosh, I've got an opportunity to stay. So yeah, that's my advice. And that's only because I've been through that process. So let me just answer a couple more questions before we go. I know we've gone over, and thank you for sticking around. I feel it's important to answer your questions because that's what you're here for. So yeah, let's have a look at your question about the 100 pages when I said your application is going to be about 80 to 100 pages. To be written, to be uploaded. Okay, so what I mean is, if you think about it, you've got 10 documents, and those documents are 3 pages each. Now, I didn't factor in, and this is why it can get up to 80 to 100 pages. The application form, when you apply, it's about 25 to 30 pages. Technician asks you all these questions, like, your name, your address, all your experts, their name, their address, all those questions. But not only do you provide your experts letters, which are 3 pages, you also need to attach their CV with the letters. And some CVs can be 10 pages. It's your expert CV. So that's in addition to your 3-page letter, which you can't help. The letter needs to be 3 pages. Their CV can be however many pages. You also have to attach an audit trail to the letters, especially when they're signed by the experts. So DocuSign has an audit trail process because the reason why the assessors want this is they want to make sure, obviously, that your experts are real people, that they've signed this letter, as opposed to, you could sign the letter, you could write this letter, you could sign it yourself. So they want this DocuSign audit trail to show the IP address, to show that it's coming from, a formal email of your experts. It's just really making sure that everything's, above board. Okay. So if you think about it, there's 3 letters, there's CVs attached, there's the audit trail attached. So that's why the application pack can be, 80 to 100 pages. And the form itself it's a running document, but, it's very spaced out. So that's why it's about 20 to 30 pages, plus your 45 pages, plus your CVs and your audit trails. So 80 to 100 pages is about right. Okay. If you fit into 3 optional criteria, so as I said, you pick the mandatory criteria, which is the first criteria, leadership, and then you pick 2 out of 4 optional criteria. If you feel like you can pick 3 optional criteria, don't do that. Only select 2, and you select your 2 best ones. Okay. Yeah. They only allow you to select 2 when you upload it onto the form. So even if you prepare your documents to have 3 criteria, when you upload your documents onto the TechNation portal, they only allow you to select 2. So don't go over and above. Now, as I said, this, you could submit on the 2 criteria that you think are the strongest. And then if you get feedback and the assessors say, no, you're not endorsed because this criteria is not strong enough, and you feel like, okay, let's resubmit, but let's choose that other criteria instead and pick the one that maybe the assessor has accepted, that could be a strategy as well. But again, if you've got time, if you feel like, you can't really decide which criteria, that could be the way you could do it. And try not to be emotional about this process. I know it is very emotional when you don't get it, but if that's your strategy, we can go with that. So unfortunately, that's the best advice. You can't select 3 optional criteria. You can only select 2. Okay. Yeah, so this is another thing, is when you speak, and this is a question about experts, their CV, and the audit trail. By the time you've gone back and forth with your expert, the expert's probably really tired and just wants you to just go away, but at this stage sometimes. And you're like, okay, can you sign by DocuSign? And can you do this? Can you do that? It can get quite, yeah, you can kind of feel like you're stepping on their toes. So DocuSign is the preferred way. However, sometimes experts just sign it on Adobe, which is fine as well. And what they do is they send you an email and say, dear so-and-so, please find attach your letter of recommendation. And they attach the letter for you. So that in itself is an audit trail. They email to you with the attached letter and then the signed letter. You can't force your experts to go through the DocuSign process. If they don't want to, they don't want to. So that's the next best thing. For me, I don't want you to I don't want to ruin any relationships with your experts because of this process. Okay. My main thing is for you to maintain your relationships with your experts. Try not to overstep and do what they want, but in a bit in line with the guidelines. If the guidelines are there, but they're only guidelines, the reality is sometimes experts are like, no, I'm not going to do DocuSign. I'm just going to sign it and send it to you. That's fine. So you're just going to have to accept that, because if you force them, then that might ruin your relationship with them. Okay, and I don't want that. Your relationships with your experts are very, very important, and try not to don't let this process ruin your relationship with your expert. Okay, and now if they don't have a CV, the LinkedIn profile is a good thing. You can always download their LinkedIn profile. Underneath their profile and their name, there's a little, and this is quite interesting, not a lot of people know about this, but if you do, that's great. There's a more button underneath the LinkedIn profile. No, I can't bring up mine. And under more, it says download. And then when you hit the download button, it downloads their LinkedIn profile with all their roles and everything that they've done. So you can do it that way. You can have that. That would be really good. Yes, I hope that you can see that. Now, if it's not up to date, again, this is where you can maybe Google your expert. And if there's like a bio of them somewhere else, you can attach that to their LinkedIn CV, just to show that, maybe they haven't updated their LinkedIn CV because they're such experts and, they don't need to, update their CV. But if there's a bio of them speaking at an event or something, at least you've got something else to go on. So do whatever you can. As I said, these are all guidelines. There's always ways around things. And because I've worked in this for so long, I know all the little tricks that you can do to help you meet the guidelines or be as close to the guidelines. It's better to do that than not have anything at all. And then the assessor's like, well, what's happened here? Why haven't they got this and that? And you're like, but I can't get it. You can always manage something, and we can do as much as we can and then say, we've done everything we can. And this is where I want you to be when you work with me. We do everything we possibly can so that there can be no regrets when you send in your application. A lot of my clients who work on their own, and, as I said with the other client, they worked on it for 2 weeks, they hit submit, and instantly they regretted it. And they emailed me straight away and said, I don't think it's going to be very good, but let's work together if I get an unsuccessful decision. I don't want you to be like that when you work with me. I want you to be, Michelle, we've done everything we possibly can. There's nothing else that we could do. And, that's it. Okay, so that's where I want you to be. Now, I'm going to finish this. One more question. Okay, what documentation are you always suggesting someone to include? Okay, that are not mandatory. I'm just trying to figure out your question. I don't really understand your question. When I with my clients' documents, we need to make sure that the criteria is met. So there's mandatory criteria, which is the leadership criteria. Then there's the 4 optional criteria. So there's innovation, proof of recognition, impact, and academic contributions. I won't talk about academic contributions. Not many people choose it. So, for example, if you choose the optional criteria 3, impact, what the assessors are looking for is evidence of quantifiable metrics of your impact to the field. So if you've made impact to the industry by your company winning an innovation award through the product that you have built, that's not mandatory, but that's evidence of meeting the optional criteria 3. So it's the criteria is there, but you have to figure out how you can meet it. And a lot of people don't know how to do that on their own because this is the first time they've done the application. They don't know what the assessors will and won't accept. So this is where I'll speak to you and say, okay, let's talk about your impact. What things can you show? And we need evidence, quantifiable metrics. Anything that you do, I always want to know, so what? Okay, so what about it? Tell me what's so great about it. And the second thing I want you to know is, and then what? Okay, so you built this product, then what? What happened to it? Or you sold the product, show me what else. So I always go one step further than what you've done, so you can find out what your impact is. I hope that helps. Okay, so Prachi, I think, Prachi, you might need a quick chat with me because you've asked so many questions. Just in answer to your last question before I finish up, I know we've gone a bit over time. Try to put evidence against one criteria. So whatever document you have, one document, put that against the most appropriate criteria. Don't mix documents in different criteria. The guidelines specifically say that you need unique documents per criteria, and you can't reuse some of your documents against this different criteria. Okay, so just make sure that this document that you're providing shows impact, okay, and then another document you're providing shows leadership. So keep it very separate and don't mix things up because then you'll confuse the assessor. So, okay, I'm going to leave it here, and I hope I've answered all your questions. And this is, obviously what the webinar's for, and I hope that you guys have uh, been able to take some good feedback and information from this webinar. I really enjoy hosting these webinars, particularly with the questions that you ask. And please feel free to email me. I'm going to just put my email here for you. And please do email me, and just if you want to take this further, happy to. And I'd love your feedback. This is the first time I've done this kind of webinar, including the appeals process. And it would be nice if you can give me some feedback and tell me where you're at in the process as well. So yeah. Okay, so I hope that really helps. I'm going to send a newsletter out tomorrow attaching this recording. So watch out for that. But otherwise, I do hope that I see you again during the year, and best of luck with your applications. There will be a new endorsing body announced shortly, and then that will be my newsletter. So you're all subscribed to my newsletter anyway. So excellent. Okay, I'm going to leave it here. Thank you so much for coming. Bye, guys.